Woo! Thank you very much for coming today for our rally against Putin, against Russia's president. Let me start with acknowledging the Ghana people, their elders past and present, who are the traditional custodians of this land where we meet on today. 3 years ago, on the 30th August, the FSB agents attempted to kill the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny by poisoning him with Novichok. But he survived and now is being held in jail. On 24th of August, we have a Ukraine Independence Day. So we are here today to honor the brave people of Ukraine in their fight against Putin's regime. Free Russia would never invade Georgia in 2008. Free Russia would never invade Ukraine in 2014. Free Russia would never support a dictator, Lukashenko, in Belarus. So we need to understand that freedom in Russia means peace in Europe. Now let me introduce our host today, Emma, and she will proceed from here. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Again, thank you all for coming and Anatoly for organizing. I would first like to introduce Irina Glass. In her own words, she is a citizen of the world who is against the war.
Thank you. Thank you. I am Irina, and before February 24th of 2022, I've never been to a political rally. I never in a million years imagined that my country will bomb the Ukrainian cities and will kill Ukrainian citizens. I am Russian. Like a lot of Russian people, I have Ukrainian heritage. In fact, my mom is Ukrainian, and both of my parents come from a beautiful city of Chernihiv, which is located in Ukraine. As of yesterday, Chernihiv was attacked again. 7 people were killed, including a 6-year-old child, when the Russian missiles struck the theater in the main square. You see, I was raised to hate the war. I was raised with the slogans, peace to the world and never again. That's why I do not understand how in 21st century I'm witnessing this. I was born in St. Petersburg and raised in the crazy and dark times of 90s. I loved going to school, but more, I loved going to see my grandparents and spend summer with them, just like many, many children of my country. My grandparents lived in Ukraine. In comparison, rainy and gloomy St. Petersburg was so different with Chernihiv. That's where my grandparents lived. Chernihiv was abundance of fruit and vegetables and fresh cream and cold cuts, and I loved it there. I felt happy, safe, and always welcomed. I remember not so good times also, when my Ukrainian relatives had to flee their country and come to us in St. Petersburg in order to escape the poisonous air of Chernobyl. The information was scarce, but I vividly remember my parents discussing the event in hushed voices. It kills me now to stay here, to stand here and tell you how much I love both of the countries, how much I don't understand how the hell Russia came to this point. The event of 24th of February 2022 shaking me to my core. And I have to tell you that I've never been the same. I set out on a personal journey to understand what happened to my country, to understand how we arrived at this point. There are some people who are helping me with this, and one of them is Alexei Navalny. He is a oppositional leader who is right now in prison only to be in opposition to Vladimir Putin. When I set out for my journey, I wanted to understand what happened. And I finally stopped and looked closely at Putin's regime. And let's just be honest here. Before this bloody war in Ukraine, there have been Georgia, Donbass, Chechnya, Syria. There have been flight of MH17. There have been submarine of Kursk. There were the bombings of apartment buildings in Volgodonsk and Moscow. The fact is, Putin kills. There were critics of Putin who died violently or in suspicious circumstances. There were journalists, human rights lawyers, Russian oligarchs, former KGB agents, you name it. So many people. The fact is, Putin kills. On his hands, the blood of hundreds of Ukrainian children. On his hands, blood of thousands of civilians. On his hands, blood of opposition leaders and journalists. On his hands, blood of people. We must not kid ourselves that if Ukraine falls, Putin will stop there. He will not. That's why I'm standing here and talking to you about it. No war, freedom to Alexei Navalny. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. The next speaker we have is Maida Badromir. Maida used to live in Bosnia, near Sarajevo. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing these names. She came to Australia in 2010. She survived missile bombings and extreme hunger during the Bosnian War of 1992 to 1995. Her relatives were held in a concentration camp for 2 months.
Thank you so much. Sorry guys, I'm not a professional speaker. I'm just an ordinary person who's been through some extraordinary things. Putin is killer? Yeah, and a liar. He's also a war criminal, a callous psychopath who is not just killing people in Ukraine, but he's also sending his own people to death. Where are his kids, his family? I'm sure that they are not at a battlefield in Ukraine. Putin, Hitler, Khomeini, Bin Laden, and others have one thing in common: they are psychopaths. these callous individuals are disconnected from their souls and from their consciousness. They are cruel leaders who have an utter disregard for human life. I was 18 when the war started, in 1992 in Bosnia. We were actually attacked, so we didn't have any choice but to defend ourselves, defend our lives. And what's worse is that people who attacked us, who attacked my country, were spreading lies to the world, saying that we are terrorists, we are extremists and other nonsense. Worry not. They are now convicted, safe in the prison. They are convicted at the International Court for War Crimes. Now same thing is happening to Ukraine. Honestly, guys, I can't believe it. We live in modern times. This is total nonsense. And anyone who has a little bit of conscience should do something about it. We should stop it now. "20 years after the war stopped, and I'm still recovering from trauma. The only thing that worries me, I think, that people are not even aware of what war is. The main struggle becomes when the war stops, actually, you know. They will have hundreds of thousands traumatized people, orphans. It's gonna take decades to recover. It makes me sad. It makes me so sad. And the only important thing that I have to say is, while we live our normal lives, so-called normal lives, men, women, and children are killed in Ukraine by some sick people who have no conscience whatsoever. Time to stop liars and killers now. Thank you.
Thank you, Maida. The next speaker is Ted Hui. He is a prominent Hong Kong politician and former member of the Legislative Council of Hong Kong from the Democratic Party. Ted fled Hong Kong after the Chinese regime prosecuted him for advocating democratic values, and now currently lives in Australia.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Anatoliy, the organizer, the host, and everyone for having me. My name is Ted. As introduced, I'm living in exile now in Australia as a former Hong Kong legislator. So I know that feeling of yours, those behind me, and those suffering from persecutions in Russia, and those lives being taken away in Ukraine. We are all the same. We are facing the same kind of authoritarian regimes. We are facing the same kind of people like Putin, a terrorist, a murderer, so as the China Xi Jinping. They are the same kind of people. They are best friends together nowadays. I know that feeling when you're in a country and you cannot speak up. Once you speak up for freedom and democracies, you get thrown in jail. And it's even worse in Russia, from what I know. Jail times go to decades of imprisonment. And also, in the worst case, they get killed, they get poisoned. So that's the situation we are facing. in Hong Kong, recalling those comrades that's been facing the same thing, facing jail times. It's heartbreaking enough to just think of them. So how about those who are still suffering in war for years? Those children, those poor people in Ukraine who lost their loved ones with their families. I cannot imagine that kind of pain. But the question is, why are we suffering from those pains and wounds? It's because of these dictators in the world, Xi Jinping, Putin. They should pay a price. Why are they still the two biggest countries ruling the world? Look at China. China is the best friend of Russia nowadays. In the United Nations, China has been abstaining from condemning the war, the invasion into the Ukrainian land, and abstaining from speaking up. They said they support peace. Xi Jinping said that they want the war to be stopped. They're happy to be the mediator, but it's all a lie. He's the best friend of Putin. You probably wouldn't know. After the invasions by Russia to Ukraine, the investment of Russian companies in Hong Kong has been doubled, tripled. They've been using Hong Kong, using China to financially support the war in Ukraine. China is a helping hand. China is hiding from Russia, but in fact, is one of those invaders of Ukraine. So we know people like us, we need to stand together. And you probably didn't know this. Hong Kongers try to organize protests to support the Ukrainians, to support Ukraine, to speak up against Putin. But they were arrested by Hong Kong police. They were taken away. We were stopped. Even in our country, in Hong Kong, we cannot speak up for Ukraine. Why? Because China is the best friend of Russia. Because Xi Jinping is supporting Putin. So we need to be united and we need to stop all these. We have the responsibility to speak up for those who cannot, for those in Russia, for those dissidents, for people like Navalny. I understand there are many people like Navalny, and I feel like I'm one of them, being persecuted, striving to speak out. When they cannot, it's our responsibility to speak out. So I encourage the Australian members of the public and people in this Parliament House to speak up for those dissidents in Russia, to really speak up for those who are suffering in the war in Ukraine. We cannot be numb. I know people in the world have been quite numb and feel disenchanted because they cannot change anything. They feel powerless. But we cannot simply just turn a blind eye and accept this, accept that this is reality. I will never accept this happening to my home country, to my loved ones, to innocent people in the world. That is why I'm encouraging members of public, the Australian politicians, to really speak about this in public and to pressure the governments to really put up sanctions, put up the hardest measures, going hard against Russia. I think this is something we need to do urgently for the peace of the world. And I'm really thankful for your courage of speaking up and coming up to speak. Protests like this cannot be easy, and we know how that feels as Hong Kongers. In our situations, we need to hide our faces, hide our identities, because speaking up in public, even in foreign countries, in the free countries, going back to Hong Kong, you'll be arrested. and your life is over. So we understand how courageous and what kind of courage it takes to speak up in public. Thank you, all of you, and may peace be on Russia, on Navalny, and on Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Our next speaker is Henry Davis. He is an Adelaide City Councillor, my boss, the owner of HLD Law, a conveyancing company, and many more things.
Thank you, Emma. Today I stand before you with a heavy heart as Russia continues its war in Ukraine. An aggressive nation, unafraid of taking innocent lives, which has been waging war, a horrific and unjust and bloodthirsty war for some 542 days. That's 542 days of atrocities, 542 days of terror, 542 days of war crimes. The lives lost and homes destroyed, for all one man's vanity. As we gather here, I'm reminded of the sacrifices made by those who came before us, who laid down their lives on distant shores to ensure that the horrors of war never engulf our world again. My own grandfather, his name sounds proudly on the walls of the War Memorial with 103,000 other names of heroes who gave their lives to defend the freedom that we enjoy here in Australia. The 100,000 names etched on the walls of the War Memorial is a testament to the sacrifices of those who've paid for freedom with their blood. We stand here today united, not just by our shared history, but by the values that bind us as a nation. The Australian spirit is one that stands for justice, for freedom, and for the protection of innocent lives, no matter where in the world they may be. It is with this spirit that I issue a call to arms to defend a distant nation, fighting for its sovereignty and the safety of its people. As we gather here, our thoughts are on the people of Ukraine. The Australian government has stood in solidarity with Ukraine, recognising the importance of supporting a nation's right to self-determination and security. But we can do more, and I'm calling on the Australian government to support the people of Ukraine in the defence of their country. Australia is strong enough to help Ukraine in this fight, and we cannot turn a blind eye to the suffering that unfolds. For the lives of thousands hang in the balance. Ukraine is not the only nation threatened by Putin's Russia, and a Russia led by Putin is a scourge on this world with weapons and capability to destroy us all. It is not a matter of politics, it is a matter of humanity. Australia has deep bonds with the people of Ukraine, and we should never forget that there are some 50,000 Australians who are of Ukrainian descent. And these are not mere statistics, but a reminder that we are connected by bonds of kinship and a shared heritage. We cannot stand idly by when the lives of our sisters and our brothers are at risk. In history's annals, there are stories of our two nations, Ukraine and Australia, joining hands to fight for what is right. And in 1942, the Soviet Union, of which Ukraine was a part at the time, fought alongside Great Britain, Australia, and America to defeat Japan. It was soldiers from Ukraine who fought shoulder to shoulder with us to ensure a lasting peace. But we must now stand with Ukraine. The Russian people are not to blame. They live in fear of persecution. They suffer rigged elections. And they cannot yet stand against their corrupted government. But I hope one day they will seek their own freedom. The world watched as the Wagner Group marched on Moscow. The world held its breath in hope that this could be the end of tyranny in Russia. Sadly, that wasn't to be. It shows, though, that Putin is not untouchable, and I hope the people of Russia will see this now. Let us not forget that Australia in 2014 suffered its own civilian casualties at the hands of Putin. Let me remind you that in 2014, the world stood in disbelief when Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 was tragically shot down by Russian troops. 38 Australians lost their lives that day, victims of a tragedy brought about by aggression, and they were killed by the actions of Putin's regime. In our interconnected world, alliances and friendships are vital. Those we support today may be the ones that we call upon to defend us in future, and our actions reverberate across time and space. Therefore today, let us stand united for the cause of peace in Ukraine and for the cause of freedom in Russia. Our voices, our actions, and our solidarity matter. Let our rally be a testament to the Australian spirit. Let us show support for those fighting for their lives in Ukraine. Let us honour their sacrifice by ensuring that the sacrifices of brave Ukrainians and the innocents' lives lost there are not in vain. May we stand together for a better world. May we stand together for freedom. And may we stand together for peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. I now invite anyone who wishes to say something to come up down and share their voice.
Hello. Hello, public. My name is Vladimir Litvinov. I came here in Australia 4 months ago. I escaped from Russian Putin regime to a better peace, to a better world, for my freedom, for my happy family, for those who can't fight in Ukraine. I support Alexei Navalny in this prison fight. I wish he can escape from this misery. I wish all the best for all Ukrainian people. I have lots of friends in Ukraine. Some of my family members came from Ukraine. My family is half Ukrainian. I'm Russian. And I don't support this bloody war. Thank you so much.